Okay, it's 7:01 and nobody else is in the waiting room.
Okay. So, I guess this is, I'll let Valerie sign in first. It's awkward, because I can't really see anybody except Jeff, so I feel as if I'm just speaking to an empty room, but for everybody that has signed in, thank you very much for joining us. My name is Walter Pass. I'm with the Economic Development Department in town of Kirkland Lake. I'm joined today by our technical consultant, Jeff Barton. He deals with forestry, and he will have his picture up there. I'm also joined today by Megan Elliott, and she's the town clerk. She's running the technical side of the show. And this is something that's relatively new, certainly for me, but I think for Megan as well and Jeff. So please excuse any technical glitches as we go along. We want to keep it as streamlined and as efficient as possible, but the gremlins do run free sometimes. There's a couple of housekeeping items. One is we're asking people that to keep their videos off, and that's more so that we don't have any problems with bandwidth or anything like that while we're going through the presentation. A few times we've had other sessions like this that had proved to be a problem. Also, we're asking everybody to stay muted. What we'll be doing in terms of presentation, I'll go through it up here when we get into the presentation itself, but I'm obligated to give you the background and the shall we say the conceptual framework for land management in the Kirkland Lake area. That comes as part of a presentation. I want to go through that. I think that within the presentation, you're probably going to find most of the answers to the questions that you were asking. And at the end, we do cover questions that were submitted over the public consultations online, and we open it up to a discussion. Discussions themselves, please, this is not a forum for lobbying. Okay, we simply run a public consultation. We want to lobby one way or another, that's actually done with council. Council makes the decision, not us. Last part is that the session is being recorded and will be posted on the town's YouTube channel. We will be making references to that when we bring the presentation to council. Many of the things that we cover will also be covered during that presentation to council. Last item, I was made aware today that the email address that was posted on the site did not work, and it's news to me because I've used that one for years and I've never had a problem. One fellow did point out this morning that when he copied and pasted it into his email client, that there was some kind of coding that went with it. I don't know. I did not do a hyperlink. I'm sorry about that. We'll definitely have that corrected in the future. Okay, let's go to the first slide. Just briefly, so it's a proposed consultations. There are two areas. The first one, yeah, no, go ahead. The first one is by the harvest block by the Kirkland Lake landfill. One of the major points to make up front, that's the only part that the town owns. The other areas that were cut and all that harvested around that, that's not town property, that's private property. Second slide, please. This is a approximation of the area north of Swastika that we have received unsolicited expressions of interest in. So I just want to put it up. It's not great, but I've been struggling with maps. I think we'll have that much better ones when we get to council, but I can't produce them on my own. So let's go to the next one. These are the mining, sorry. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. These are the mining claims within those areas. And again, you've seen that on the presentation that was online. Go to the next one, please. Okay, so public engagement process. In 2020, Town of Kirkland Lake received unsolicited expressions of interest from forestry companies to harvest the two sites in question. As anytime we have an offer or expression of interest to do business with the town, it's brought to council. In January 2021, council directed staff to gather public input prior to council making any decision on whether to proceed or not, in whole or in part. Online consultations were extended to March 8th. They solicited about 95 comments and questions. Purpose of today's Zoom meeting is to address those comments and questions received within the context of the land management agreement. And in April, a summary report will be provided to council, and it's at that point, it's their decision to make. The agenda itself, we give the explanation of the landowners management agreement. We review the questions and comments brought online, and then we can go to the floor. Meeting etiquette. Session is meant to be mutually educational. We're here to, we're holding this to ensure we understand and represent public concerns accurately when we go back to council. We also want to make sure the public understands how the process works, regardless of what council decides. Key point to make, council has not made any decision. There is no harvesting going on. There's nothing planned right now. This is a consultation only. Common courtesy prevails. We must stay polite and respectful of each other. Hey, Landowners Management Agreement, LMA. It's effectively an asset management plan of the land base and the forest on it being considered the asset. The LMA defines that asset and provides long-term guidance for the town for the management of those resources. Everything that's done is consistent with the municipality's official plan. It's endorsed by the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. It is essentially a code of conduct that we commit to. This is the asset. This is how we manage it. This is what we promise we will do. For example, reforestation. The LMA serves as a forestry plan, but it's much more than that. It recognizes that the value of the land base may be measured in different ways. Monetary, in the case where there's something sellable, like harvesting, or a contributor to the environment, or to contribute to the social well-being of the community. More than likely, it's always a combination of them all. But the key takeaway here is, oh, you see a block of land, and you think that's far better served as a recreation area, then that's how it's managed, as a recreation area. The question then becomes access, safety, whatever. Next slide. Options to achieve the best returns, and that's, again, not necessarily financial, include but are not limited to sale or lease of lands to other individuals, developers, forestry, mining companies, managing the forest for short-term supply of fiber to local and regional mills, retaining the land in municipal ownership and exploring opportunities for partnerships with other user groups, or developing the properties for non-industrial purposes, i.e. Residential use, seasonal or permanent. These are all things that the plan considers and brings forward to council and says, here's your parameters. What would you like to do? Next one. Oh, thank you. Now, we came upon this public consultation specifically because we had, and again, unsolicited, we didn't go out and get them, expressions to harvest the timber in some areas. So that's the question that goes out. Timber harvesting is and remains an important option to consider. Why? Revenue generation? Yeah, sure. Forest management purposes, to affect the regeneration of aging stands. Some of them are older, and they only like the rest of us. We're just going to get older. And to protect the forest and respond to threats, weather, insects, pathogens, invasive species, fire. We had the fire in 2012. That was a wake-up call. We are seeing the spread of spruce budworm. We are seeing the spread of tent caterpillar and others. Doesn't mean that it's going to hit the forest right now, but it's something we do remain aware of. I think the Michigan Forestry Alliance, it's the M&R seeking input on spruce budworm management practices going forward. If harvesting is directed by council, then the LMA parallels the policies and practices employed in the management of Crown forests. Okay? We don't do anything different. We try to follow the best practices as given to us by the Crown. The land is divided into potential harvesting blocks. It's assigned values in each block, and a framework is developed that addresses the harvesting practices, the value protections, and the regeneration strategies. Okay, that again is, as I say, the code of conduct. We don't just say, okay, we want that cut, go over there and do whatever you want. We've never done that, we won't do that. Harvesting, one of the big things with that came through the public consultations, areas of concern. That could be waterfront, it could be wildlife habitat, etc. The document has a series of prescriptions as to how these, what we call again, areas of concern must be treated. We're using the MNR approved guidelines and implementation manuals, and a detailed prescription is put together for each AOC. Now, an AOC, like what is it? Well, think of a peregrine falcon nest, an active wetland with a beaver dam in it, shoreline on the lake, trail, like a skidoo trail, a house. Those are all areas of concern. And these are prescriptions that tell the companies what they must do there. And again, they're the same, and in some cases more, and in other cases can be more restrictive than what the government puts out. That's up to council. The prescriptions themselves do include reserves where no operations are allowed, modified operations, or regular operations, individually combinations. So on one map of the land, you can see where the concerns are and how the operations are affected by that and reflect that. It's hard for me to describe. Jeff, is there anything that I should say better?
No, I think that I think you captured it pretty well, Wilf. They're very broad. The prescriptions cover a lot of values that Wilf mentioned, and the range of those prescriptions goes from, as you mentioned, a no cut to a modified cut to a regular operations. But it can also include things like timing, like whether that's seasonality or things along that line. So it's got some flexibility, and I think the key point is that with the municipal plan, you've got the ability, the commitment from the community, from the municipality, that it won't be less than what's applied to the Crown resource, but you've got the flexibility to enhance some of those to make them more protective.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point to keep in mind in light of the comments that came back during the consultations. Over here, these are some of the areas of concern designations that are considered. Can you go? I'm sorry, wait. Some of the highlighted ones are questions. They reflect questions that did come in during the consultation, so we just highlighted that. And could you go to the next one slide? Here it continues. You'll see that recreational trails are in there. Again, they're documented ones. The reserves in that, the standing timber left 20 meters from the edge of the documented travel trail, residential as well. 100 meters, you have to stay at least 100 meters away from any kind of residences. Obviously, we want to stay more away further than that. Also, viewscape management area. So if something has been identified as that, then how are we going to treat it to preserve that? Okay, let's go to the next one. A lot of comments came in about water quality, fisheries. Reserves are measured, and I'm probably going to sound like a failure of high school science class, but I struggle with these. Normal high water mark. So that's the point where the seasonal flooding resulting from the spring runoff is at its highest. And they estimate that using different benchmarks. So the part where there's like willow or dogwood, alder that occurs on the edges, the outside edge of an open muskeg or grassland, all wetlands, which extend above that. Then you also have, and this was another concern that was raised, moose aquatic feeding areas. Like, what do you do about that? Again, that's also taken into account. And you'll often, as you'll see on the Crown Forest, they often look and they put corridors and wildlife corridors for the wildlife to continue to move within the area. And trying, again, you're mimicking to a great extent the natural disturbance that occurs, like when the fire has gone through there. It also doesn't burn everything to the ground. Usually it leaves things up, and that's what the animals utilize. Can you go to the next one? Big question recurred over and over again, and I'm taking this one directly from the report that had gone to council. who does what, who's the role and responsibilities. In our case, and I think it's probably not unique, but we put the burden on the contractor. Okay, we have the rules, we make sure they understand them, and we inspect and follow up on it. But if there is a cut that's brought forward, the contractor, they have to provide all the services, labor, supervision. You'd expect that. They also assume all responsibility to acquire the timber rights on behalf of the municipality for all trees reserved or pine reserved. That's kind of the breakdown on ownership of the trees, I suppose you would say. We retain the ownership of the land and the ownership of all timber rights, even when they go out and get the permission to cut. Be responsible for completion of all applicable permits, licenses, like water crossings, anything like that. Be responsible for the payment of any and all applicable Crown dues and fees. We don't get involved in that. That they have to calculate into the proposal they're bringing forward. A few others, go ahead. They're solely responsible for remediation of issues and payment of penalties. So if they decide they're going to cut and run, they don't come. The Crown doesn't come after us. It's already built into that proposal, and the Crown is going after them. Ensure that harvesting standards are carried out to provincial standards at minimum. Ensure that all round wood is delivered to approved mills in Ontario, consistent with the M&R wood movement policy. In our case, it's local and regional. And provide record of all timber delivered from the parcels to the mills. We're going to go back up to where you see harvesting standards carried out in provincial standards, minimal. Our plan goes from 2012 to 2022, and it has to be renewed. We have areas of concern that reflect the standards from 2012. Any harvesting that goes on, we recommend to council, you use the standards of today. They are stricter, and that will be our baseline. So it's actually an improvement. Go one more, please. Also, this came up. Any roads, municipal roads and existing forest access road trails must remain open to the public during and after the harvesting operation within safety parameters. And they're left in as good condition or better than they were prior to the harvesting operation. I know that's a what do you call it, subjective decisions or a call sometimes, because you may think that's a great road and the next person is just taking out their undercarriage. We usually have that worked out pretty well with the companies. Also, they must provide a harvest and renewal plan prior to the commencement of any work that's consistent with the silviculture rules. Now, we had questions, and I'll get to them in the later on. Why wouldn't the company just cut and run? Jeff made a really good point earlier. Most of these companies, they're in the business to stay in the business. Okay, the performance bond does cover the cost, and they also have, in many cases, certifications, national, provincial, national, or international, that they want to hold on to, sustainable forestry company and things like that. This is not something that they take lightly. The ones that do take it lightly, and yes, they're there. They're also the ones that usually can't get a performance bond or will not put any money down in trust. We don't deal with them. Okay, Jeff, you have any comments on that? I tend to be a little emotional on that one.
Yeah, no, again, that's right. And contractors in general want to do a good job. They want to have a good result at the end of the day. I think it's important that our role, or the municipal role, is that we lay out the ground rules for them clearly and concisely, so that there's no surprises. I think the companies that are around our area, we're fortunate to have some really top flight companies, both in the contracting end and the milling end of it. They've all been here a number of years, and they want to stay here. So the forestry world is kind of it's kind of small in a lot of ways in terms of the number of people. People know each, it's similar to a lot of other sectors, but word gets around. If a contractor is bad news or problematic, that news will travel, and it'll make it challenging for them to find other opportunities. So they want to do a good job, not for the reason that I just stated, but they just fundamentally want to do the right thing in the forest, to conduct their operations, but do it correctly.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. Okay, these are all the responses that came in online. I just try to group them together because there's usually a common theme. So preserve the wildlife, the habitat, and ecological diversity. That's a commonly said, I think the most common one that was brought forward. Preserve the area as a recreation area. Preserve the area as a barrier to noise pollution and encroaching development. Primarily, they're talking about the activities at the mine. Any kind of work you do will negatively affect the quality of life, property values, aesthetics, tourism in the Kirkland Lake area. We absolutely don't want to see access through Swastika as too dangerous and detrimental. Use alternatives. Why don't you sell the land instead? We have not in my backyard, NIMBYism. That is very specific. I don't want you to cut here, but why don't you go 5 kilometers over there and go crazy, go do whatever you wish. Surprisingly, that comes out. Why you should do a harvest. You should do that to protect the forest against infestation, fire, encourage diversity of both wildlife and plant life. You should do this to generate revenue. Conversely, no, it's just not worth the revenue. So these are the general themes that came out of the online feedback. These are the questions that came out, and let me pull my cheat sheet back here. Is this done in preparation for a subdivision development? No, never even heard that. How much money will the town earn? Are you clear cutting just to pay the town debt? We can only estimate the value of the timber, but we don't know and won't know the value of it, the actual exercise, until we put out an RFP. Okay, because they have different costs, they will identify them, and that's going to come back in the estimations. We also wouldn't state whatever estimated value we think it has, because that has in the past, and I certainly don't want to see this ever again, influence the competitive process. If you say, oh, well, it's $100,000, you can guarantee that all your proposals will be at $100,000 or $1 more. Also, private land that is being scheduled to be harvested in that area, that will be going on. Is there an opportunity to get economies of scale if this is going on and you get a higher return? Not really an important consideration for the municipality, unlike other landowners, but it's always there. Also, allocation, like, is it you're just doing this to pay the town debt? Allocation of any revenue is at council's discretion. Okay, to date, council has directed that any revenues realized are used to underwrite the community improvement program. That's money that we give out to local businesses to improve their facilities, to take some of the costs off of growing or expanding. Another question, why not just open the unserviced lots, riverfront, lakefront? Yeah, we're going to recommend that. There's a history there. We looked at that a few years ago, and the planning opinion we had at that point was, you're kind of opening the town to some liabilities here, okay? Because you're going to have roads in there, and you're going to have access, this, that, and that. It didn't get any feet, didn't go anywhere. I would like to propose, and I'll cover that in the next slide, that we do engage a planner to give us a scope of what can be done, what our liabilities are, so that council can see that can this be moved forward or not. I agree with people. I think that is a very valuable way of going about it. What happens to property values and who covers possible decreases in values? Any harvesting, especially if block 10 is taken out of consideration, would not occur near any homes in Swastika, so there would be negligible impact on property values. As with any other situation, should a property owner feel that their values have been affected, the onus is on them to demonstrate that. Will the performance bond reflect the cost of replanting, or will the logger just blow it off? The bond will reflect the cost of replanting. It's unlikely the harvesting company of good repute would be willing to compromise both their money and reputation. That's what Jeff had addressed earlier. Can't the government limit the acreage of wood cutting to smaller areas and more spots? As the municipality is considered a private landowner, it can direct the harvesting to be done in any way it wants. However, the harvest, should it occur, must still be sufficiently economical to attract the interest of industry. If you made it so restrictive that nobody's interested, well, end of story. Also, much of the timber in question is actually owned by the Crown. So a forest resource license is required for the ministry in order to proceed. Okay, that comes back to what you're doing and how you're doing it in the on the land base. Have any environmental studies been done to assess possible impact of increased runoff into the waterways? Any harvesting adheres to or exceeds the guidelines that are in place for the management of Crown forests in Ontario. Okay, that's the gold standard. That's what we're following or exceeding. Will there be a buffer between the Blanche and the harvest area and the harvest site to protect the waterways? Yes, the AOCs establish minimum buffers that are measured from the normal high water mark, anywhere from 30 to 90 meters, depending on the slope. That's based on the prescriptions that would be in place. Will a forest barrier remain between the harvest area and the trails, roads, and railways? Reserves around trails, and these are documented trails like the Skidoo Trail, and roads are around the trails are prescribed. Under the Temiskaming Forestry Alliance's plan, for example, the width of a trail is, the width of the reserve is 0 to 20 meters from the requirement that the trails are cleared of brush upon completion as well. So you have to return the trail to what it was, and there is a barrier there. Typically, there are no AOCs assigned to roads. However, there are exceptions in some areas. Deferrals where there's a small width of forest left, or until the forest has been regenerated, so that you do see the trees coming up in the behind it. That can be discussed as to what's best on each particular site. Buffers around hydro and rail are established in cooperation with the responsible agencies. Okay, and you have to that'd be a conversation, say, with ONR. Why are you looking at harvesting the lands? Why don't you just sell the land? Like I say, harvesting is one option among others. There are arguments in favor of it, just as there are arguments against it. Okay, it's not the only thing. Proactive management of the forest is important to take into account. You don't have to, though. You can sell the land. One of the risks that I really want to address, like when you say, okay, well, just sell the land, you'll get your tax money. Okay, a lot of people raised the specter of what happened at the landfill. Okay, that's private ownership. I don't say that if it gets sold to a private owner, that's what's going to happen. I will never say that. But there is a possibility. They are not bound by any code of conduct, such as the land management agreement that the municipality has. We have seen that where people will buy a large swath, they'll take the piece that's best to them, and they'll just go get the best dollar for the harvesting. Best dollar has often meant that the wood didn't even stay in Ontario. You got paid, rape and run. Now it's also private land, so you don't even get access to it. When it's municipal land, whoa, enjoy, similar to a crown forest. So there's some considerations just to keep in mind for that one. I think that selling of land parcels is something that has to be considered and should be done so carefully, but let's not see it as a panacea for everything else. Are you only going to replant jackpine? No. The focus is on producing a healthy, vibrant forest. What is planted, where, when, and how is based on each ecosite. Some areas, jackpine is going to do naturally much better, but in other areas, a mixed one is probably better. Okay. So just from the feedback to this point, recommendations I think need to go forward to council, and that's these can be changed for sure. They can certainly they're going to be added to. No access through Swastika from any point. Leave it out. Okay, it was floated. We had to do that. We got the answer. Block 10 north and east of Swastika. I'm recommending it be removed from the current consideration and all future plan updates. Okay, it is part and parcel of the fabric of Swastika. You have a lot invested in there. Yes, there will always be, you know, concerns or whatever else that come forward. I don't know. Somebody mentioned garbage or something like that. No, we remove block 10 as a harvest consideration. That's the recommendation. Repurpose RSC 209 and RSC 10. But those are the two ones that are down by Highway 66. Okay, we repurpose them in whole or in part for future residential or commercial development. We consider harvesting them only upon imminent development. It's, and that's something that I have to take to council, and they'll probably have to get a planning opinion on. But Kirkland Lake is critically short of highway front commercial property. Maybe that's something. Probably could be attractive on a residential basis too. I don't say it's going to happen. I say it's something to bring forward. That we get a planning opinion regarding the feasibility of selling the lots alongside the Blanche River for seasonal residential use. That's some mining claims listed down below. Again, we've had some disagreements within the municipal structure in years gone by as to how viable that is. I think it has to be revisited, and I think that it should be put on the table, because if we can do it, say here in the Blanche River, well, we have other properties elsewhere too. What's involved with that? I think it's a conversation that Kirkland Lake Council should consider, so I'd like to bring that forward. A lot of the comments were about, oh my God, it's going to look terrible once you paddle down the Blanche River. No, let's commission a GIS viewscape analysis to determine what the appropriate setbacks would be. What does that mean? It basically takes a perspective of somebody sitting in a canoe looking at the shoreline. What will they see? Now, you already have your inbuilt prescriptions, anywhere, what did I say, from 30 to 90 meters from high water line where you can't cut. But this takes it a step further and says, okay, what would you see if you were floating down the river? And let's build towards that. Other prescription, as I mentioned this one before, all AOC prescriptions be consistent with those applied to current forest management plans. So again, reserves around fishery areas and that be expanded from 30 meters on a 15% slope to 50 meters. That's just an example. Okay, so we'd be adopting the higher, stricter AOC prescriptions. Also, part of any revenues generated be directed to updating the land management agreement. And I think with, I'd like to recommend with a stronger emphasis on identifying areas of recreational concern that could perhaps be looked at development in a different way. That's again just a recommendation going forward. Okay, that's it. I'd like to move to questions. Please, I have to emphasize again, this isn't the venue to, I don't know how else to say it, it's like preach, okay? We're not the decision makers. We simply collect information. A lot of people have really good questions. I'd really like it if you could focus your stuff on questions that perhaps we can answer and help enlighten everybody and help us a lot too. We do have people waiting. I think Mitch Mullins was asked to go first. And so perhaps if you could keep your things maybe 10, 15 seconds, like get the question out, but let us focus on answering it as well. Yes, please.
So right now we have everybody muted. I can unmute you. If you either can raise your hand with the reaction function or turn on your video, then I can know who's in line for questions. Mitch. So I found Mitch. I've asked you to unmute Mitch if you'd like to speak.
Yeah, earlier you said that there was options to achieve best return on the asset, and there was 4 options. When does that take place? Is that you guys have already looked at it? No, you're not gonna sell the land. You're not gonna retain the land for to explore opportunities for partnership with local groups, or is that part of what goes to council?
That would be actually part of what goes to council. Like when we did the plan in 2012, and you have to understand, I think we're one of the 2 municipalities in Ontario or something. We were one of the very few that ever did any kind of planning like this. And we brought those forward as statements that we should be looking at. And to try to do that on the entire land base of Kirkland Lake, you take each parcel and to apply that, it wasn't practical. It was council's direction at the time too, was, okay, when something comes forward, then let's look at it from that prism at that point. You understand what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and so when we get into this kind of consultation, that's the stuff that what we have seen come forward. Like, say specifically Block 10, north of Swastika by Riverside. Like, oh my God, like that is something all our families enjoy. That's really a recreational area. Good. I may know that from walking through it. My opinion does not matter. I need to hear from you guys. And that's what we bring forward. Like I say, in the recommendation, Block 10, take it out. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, one quick other thing too, in the land management agreement there, it says ideally artificial regeneration will occur within 1 year of the harvest.
Yes.
So how do you manage that? Like, if you're just saying ideally they're going to do it within a year.
Yeah, ideally. What I have learned, and I'm not a forester, I've spent more time chasing fires in the bush than ever saving a tree, but what I learned very quickly, and Jeff can speak to it more, regeneration immediately might look good and make you feel good. It could end up in not such a healthy forest. That there is a role for Father Time in this, and that is, a couple of winters they press the debris that's left in the forest down, begins to break it down, and that makes for better planting conditions. And that's something that I think we need to reflect in an update to the plan. What is best for those areas, and should not put an artificial thing like 1 year on it. As it was explained to me, you can make something look really, really nice, and it's not a healthy forest. It's not going to really do anything in the future. Or it might sacrifice a little bit of how it looks right now, but at least it comes back as a healthy forest. Let's do what's right with it. Is that good, Mitch?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Ask this gentleman to unmute.
Rick, that would be you. Just, yeah, the mic. Jeff, is there anything? Oh, there it is.
Yeah, just one thing that I noticed mentioned in the list of items, and it wasn't highlighted, was the great blue heron colony. As an avid user of this river system, right from Kanogami Lake right through to the duck pond in Swastika, there's quite an extensive amount of great blue herons. Just I wanted to make you aware of that, because I don't know what constitutes a colony of great blue herons, but there's nesting and there's quite a bit along that river area. And just one quick question is, how many unsolicited requests were received from these companies to harvest this forest?
Okay. On the first one, I'd like to ask Jeff if you can give the explanation that he gave to me just prior to the start of what happens when they come across something that they didn't think was there. Okay, so that I'm going to ask him to address that. Just to your other question, 3, and one I'm not sure if they were just fishing or actually serious. So Jeff, if you could jump in on that one for Mr. Whitty.
So in the crown context, Typically what happens is there's what's called a change to operation. So the companies or the forestry operators will go into an area with a map and a identified values and areas of concern prescription, but they may stumble across something as you mentioned, a heron rookery or a bald eagle's nest or some kind of value or anything, mining claims, you know, anything in that list. They come across something that wasn't identified. Typically there's a circle back type of a mechanism that you identify that value, and you don't claim as an operator, you don't claim ignorance and say, oh, that wasn't on my map, so I kept cutting. There's a, you know, kind of a hold the horses, make sure that they're well set back, investigate, make sure they have the right information, update the data that you're working with, the maps, and assign the appropriate area of concern restriction as it may be. It may be that it's abandoned and it's not an issue, but it may well be active, in which case you need to apply that prescription. So that's what happens I will never say that we're perfect, but that's certainly the intent, that you apply the right prescription to those situations where you come across that value. But it's good to know if you know, like we'll certainly circle back with the ministry to get any values layers they have. But if there's other individuals that know that there's a specific value, you seem quite familiar with that type of value, then it's important to get it injected so it doesn't get missed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think that, yeah, they'll probably ask you to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Good evening, guys.
Oh.
In the projected future usage of the land, you had mentioned that there might have been interest for sale at least to mining companies or other private entities. Has there been any interest generated or any interest expressed to the municipality about selling or leasing that land after deforestation?
No, not that I've received anything.
My concern being that it's immediately adjacent to Kirkland Lake Gold's property. No,
that is divided out anyway. Like we'd be only on ours, and I have not received any from mines or forestry companies.
The other thing too is you mentioned that part of the proceeds of selling this timber would be to update the LMA come 2022 when it expires. Any idea about what the projected cost of updating that LMA might be, and would it justify deforesting municipal lands?
I think, well, a couple of questions. One is, hey, good catch. You almost got me that one. No, I think that the LMA should be updated regardless of whether you're forestry or not. Okay, because if you look at it and say, okay, well, what about development as recreation? What are your guidelines? What are you committing to as a council and as a corporation to the community of how you're going to approach that, how you're going to take it into account, what your mechanism is, you know? So to me, harvesting and the LMA as an item of guidance for the municipality are not necessarily tied together. I think that even without any harvesting at all, say you get a council that absolutely doesn't want to do that in the future, you should still update that. Okay, give you an example, and I'm pulling this one out of left field here, left field. Say there's a bad fire season. Just making this up, absolutely have no reality here, just making it up. But there's a bad fire season or whatever like that, and say M&R comes and says, you own that land, and you know what? Those trees are kind of in the way. We got something going on. That's harvesting. Now, what are your rules then? Are you just going to send somebody in with a bulldozer and a chainsaw and have at her, boys? No, you shouldn't. Like whether it's 10 trees or 10 acres or 10 mining claims, what are your rules? Be clear and explain that to the public. They may not like it. They may disagree with it. That's good, because that's like this thing here tells us what we need to change a little bit. But don't just look at the LMA as saying, well, okay, that's just to go cut those trees over there. If you do, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's everybody's prerogative. but it's extremely limiting to the municipality and to the, and I think it's a little bit, well, I'm stepping outside where I should be, but I think it's doing a disservice to the community. I'm actually very proud of the LMA because, like I said, we're one of the very few municipalities that ever did this. And honestly, I think that it's like your planning act. It's there for the benefit of the community. It's not there for the benefit of cutting a tree. That's just one option among many. Sorry.
I agree with you that it needs to be updated, but my question is more, does the cost of updating it necessitate cutting municipal land? I mean, could we not potentially find that money somewhere else?
Yeah. If it doesn't, yes, you could find it elsewhere. It would come from the levy at that point. Yes, you could find that in your operating. It's basically like when you get money coming in from a cut or whatever like that, unless council has directed it towards a specific reserve, it goes into your general operating and revenue anyway. And then when you put your bids in, or your budgets in, I should say, and you identify that as a need, then you say, okay, well, yeah, I think that's worthwhile. Go do that. Yeah. What is the cost? I have not put out an RFP for that yet, and I would do that.
Well, if you don't mind, I think if memory serves right, I think there was at least partial funding that you acquired first time around through NOHFC or FedNor, and those types of avenues are still likely there. So it's not, certainly you wouldn't, I wouldn't think is coming 100% out of the town's coffers. There's other partners that may step in.
I would like to think so, and I always look for that, but I'm not going to make a promise I can't.
That's right. That's right.
Is that good, Ted?
Yep, it's fine.
Thank you. That's a good question.
Any other questions? You can turn your video on or raise your hand and we can unmute you.
I see Jason Murray's line there. He's never let me off easily on anything, especially in karate. Yeah. So why would you not say anything now, Jason?
I've got Alana Clarkson.
Okay.
Hi, I'm just wondering, because you said that you were willing to take TK10 off of the harvest proposal. Hello?
Yeah, I have to be careful. I will recommend it to council. I don't make that.
Okay. Sorry. So it's recommended that we take the TK10 off of the proposed harvest. However, the large majority of the recreational trails go into TK5 and 6.
Yeah. Okay, that is true, but there's a difference between what's a documented and undocumented trail. And that's a tough one to handle to anybody's satisfaction. I'll give you an example. I do a lot of cross-country snowshoeing in that north of Esker Park. And there's some fantastic areas there, and they have these old trails and whatever else. But some of those areas are going to be, I think, probably included in a future cut from the TFA. I can't expect that they're going to recognize that, right? That would be effectively bring the industry to a halt. I don't know if it's even economical to try to do everything to that extent. Now, you said, I only got this just before leaving the office, but you have sent in a map of where the trails are. I think it would be, and Jeff, correct me here. I think it would be worthwhile trying to GPS those trails and having them on the maps that we do provide to anybody should a cut be authorized, and try to get a commitment where we can. I don't know how realistic it is, okay? And flip side, like I think most of the people, like when you go out, say, moose hunting or whatever like that, after a cut, there are new trails there. That's not that doesn't make up for what you've lost. But it's kind of a living thing. Like I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time really describing it. I don't want to make a promise that is impossible to keep. even make a recommendation that we can't even service the council to honor informal trails.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeff, you have any comment on that?
Only, I think the point about having them mapped would be helpful. So I don't know if you've got the ability.
Well,
to
they
do
are
that, or
they are currently marked,
Mhm.
and there's numerous bird feeding stations along the trails that I submitted to you today.
Okay.
So like I it wouldn't be an issue for me to go and document that, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I don't want to put you out. I mean, well, if that's
Well,
something.
we use those trails every day. You're not putting me out at all.
Okay, no, what I wanted to say was that, you know, I can definitely put that forward as a recommendation to council that we do mark it. And, you know, I'm going to put on another hat that has nothing to do with forestry at this point, but okay, that's great. Then to what extent can we begin to promote them as family fun for outside visitors, right? Get a bigger, I guess, payback on preserving them. I think that'd be important because we are, as a community, we have a lot of places you can go in and bike and hike and ski and snowshoe. And God knows we don't have any maps of them because they're all informal. So, you know, that could have a value in and of itself as well. But I agree with Jeff. It's, you know, it could be something that we forward to council and then we do. And we'd ask to do it with you.
Okay.
Put the.
All right, thank you.
Hi. Am I on?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
So I just had a question. In this presentation, there were some different numbers given to the barrier between the water and the tree line. In the report to council, it was recommended 200 meters, but I did not see that in the presentation today. So I'm looking for some clarification for that. Also, you said there would be a barrier between residences and where the harvest were to start. Is that the property line or is that the physical residence?
Anything that, okay, for the second question first, it would be from the property line. That's my understanding of it because that's your legal definition. You can always move a house around on the property line. For the other one, yes, I had put that in that report to council, but I was just pointed out to from one of the people coming back. Well, that could be maybe not so good. Why wouldn't you go and take a look and map the shoreline? And maybe then it's more, maybe then it's less, but you know exactly what you're getting as opposed to just putting a blanket 200 on. And I can't remember, I'm sorry, who?
Jessica Moore.
Okay, Jessica, you had put in your letter that time too about, you remember that one down by Highway 66? Well, is that measure 200 from the, where the river is or 200 from the railway track? Well, it's a good question. You know, what are we seeing here? How are we doing it? So instead of trying to stick to a number that may be really difficult to live with, why don't we take a look and try to map it, like use the technology that we have available to make a better and informed decision. Second thing is, again, would go back to council and recommend we look at not touching those properties alongside the river and instead look at eventual sale of them. So both answers are there. I don't know if that helps. You understand? Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
John Penzak,
Hello, I have a quick question. You mentioned you knew the value of the lumber, wondering what that would be.
Again, like I said in the presentation, I'm hesitant to say that because then it's kind of leading any kind of proposals we have coming in, and it's not an actual reflection of what the value of the project would be. And I mean, obviously, I wouldn't bring it back to council if it was for a few pennies more. It has to have substantial enough, but I am hedging on this. I'd rather not say anything like that in public.
Right, okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a question in the chat from Gary, says, who has gone back to review reforestation for areas harvested in the past?
Well, the only area that was harvested in the past was in 2020, I think, right? Late 2019, 2020, up by Clear Aqua. And they're planning to do the reforestation, if I remember correctly, this spring. I have to check on that. So when they go in to do it, we'll be with them at that point. And we will obviously ask for any kind of reports or anything like that too, so we have a record.
Okay, we have Ted Comba again, so that's
Mhm.
unmute.
Hi, guys. Sorry, I just have one more quick question. During the presentation, you mentioned that you had 3 unsolicited offers, correct?
Yes, there's one that kind of it's bugging me. I'm wondering if it wasn't an expanded or a different, slightly different one from the same company. I'd have to check that. I just don't have that with me, but yeah, we
Okay,
didn't
so
go.
we have 3 unsolicited offers. Ms. Clarkson's electronic petition alone has generated 539 signatures to date, not to mention her paper petition that she's been circulating throughout the town. Will your recommendation to council reflect that disparity in numbers?
It's actually 2 different subjects together. One is that I would ask Ms. Clarkson that, and I think she has made that arrangement, to make the presentation to council directly as to her both the petition and I suppose her findings on it. But no, like I mean, how many forestry companies do you have in the area? I mean, what, 7? So even if every company had bid on this, it would still look like, you know, David and Goliath, right?
That should count for
And-
something though, no?
Oh, yeah, but that's something that goes straight into council. I wouldn't put that into my recommendations. My recommendations would be, here's the feedback from the community. I hope I'm saying it right. Ms. Clarkson comes up and speaks on her own. She's talking to council and not through staff. So she communicates that. I'm only saying, here, this is what I've got. I don't think I'm giving you the answer you're hoping for, but to me, they're 2 separate issues. Like one is the company that might be, you know, your question logically would lead, why don't you try to get a petition to how many people would support the forestry? No, I'm not going to do that.
No, I just believe that the disparity in numbers should be reflected in a recommendation to council.
Yeah, it would be, but again, how do I say it? Like a petition, she's presenting that. She's telling them that. I'm only reflecting what I've got here in my conversations with the community.
Maybe I can jump in just to say that, so it will be reflected. Wolf is just noting that it'll be reflected directly from her. She'll be able to present that, and it'll just basically be in a different section of the agenda, and then Wolf's report will come after.
So, you know, if you were a counselor, you'd be sitting there and you'd hear her presentation, and then you'd hear mine, and you as a counselor would say, wow, like, you know, 500 names own 3 companies. But that's up to you. What value do you associate with it as? Jeff, I'm sorry, I cut you off there. Okay, and he left. Hang on. Sorry, Ted, I can't really, I don't know how to go past that explanation.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Jeff, sorry, you had something to say there?
And just I think it is important that reference. I think Megan mentioned it. The 500 gets noted. But it's not it's not a straight numbers game in the process. I think the same thing happens. Again, I'm sort of trying to defer back to the Crown situation, but it's not it's not a straight numbers game, but it's important. I think it's important that what comes back, or at least part of what comes back, is that here's what we heard as far as as far as Wilf and myself as a advisor. Here's the comments that we heard. Here's how we think we can address them or not address them, and defer to council for the final decision. But I certainly agree that it's appropriate that number gets put in, and that the questions and the comments that have come up, they get reiterated or relayed to council, so they know what the issues are and whether or not there's common ground or any kind of resolution.
Okay, I have one more question, then I'm going to let you guys go. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the current LMA that was drafted in 2012, one of the principal authors of that was Russell Williams, who at the time was employed by Roscoe Forestry. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that one of the 3 unsolicited offers was from Roscoe Forestry. So if the author of the LMA, who was employed by Roscoe Forestry,
town has of interest
and
in their sawmill,
would that not present a conflict of interest if the LMA was drafted by an employee of Roscoe Forestry? Would that exempt them from submitting a bid?
So do you mind if I take that, Wilf?
Yeah, okay.
So you're right about the origins of that of that project. That Russ was certainly one of the was the primary author coming out of the gates. Those reins got passed over back to Wilf, and then Wilf and the town of Kirkland Lake engaged me to really to write that plan or to pick it up where Wilf left off, at least in part because of that perceived conflict of interest. I don't work for a forest industry company. I'm a sole proprietor, self-employed forester, and we tried to do with that as objectively as we possibly could, and followed municipal policy about procurements and ability to entertain proposals. And at the time there were, I shouldn't say, but I'm not sure that Roscoe was a proponent in the early days after Russ left that role. Roscoe's was a proponent. The key was that we wanted the wood, if the wood was going to get harvested, the important thing was that it stayed local, which meant local or regional, and not that one company was preferred over another.
And let me jump in at this point. Okay, Ted, you made a good point, but you got to go back in time. We were approached by other private owners as well. You mentioned Kirkland Gold, they were one of them, and a few others. And the original idea was that we were going to do a forest management plan that would encompass the Kirkland Lake area of private lands, so that would be municipal plus the others. And Roscoe was going to donate their time to do it, and that would be Russ Williams. There was a good effort made to start, but with his other operations, he could not continue that. So, as Jeff said, Russ and the other private partners, Kirkland Lake Gold, and I'm trying to think of some of the other company names, they all went and did their thing, whatever it was. That left the municipality, and we also had the municipality of the township of Gautier. And together, we wanted one, because we had said that this would be something we're bringing to council. We wanted a plan for the Kirkland Lake and for the Gautier jurisdictions as municipal actors. That's why we hired Jeff. That's when it also changed from, a forest management plan to a land management plan. And Roscoe and the rest of them had nothing left to do with that. That was only us. So we still have to acknowledge the role that they played in getting the project going. But Jeff is right, he wrote that, okay? And it applies to the town. We had feedback from other foresters as we were going along too, but it doesn't prevent them from participating if there's an opportunity or so. The Roscoe really had, beyond the initial startup, had nothing more to do with that. They manage their own lands.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay, We have one more question and we are at 8:06.
Okay, bring it on.
Mitch Mullet.
Oh,
Hey, I think you went over it a little earlier with a lot of Clarkson, but how does a trail become documented that would be recognized under your LMA? I mean, some of these, there's at least one of these trails that, I mean, you can see it from satellite imaging on Google Maps. So like, how does a trail go about becoming documented? Or what does that mean?
Matthew, I'm going to ask you to attend to part of that question. I'm going to answer from a municipal perspective that I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong too. A documented trail is one that, like say, the ski trails, right? It's there, and the club maintains it, has responsibility for it, legal liability and such. There's a corporation. There's somebody there that you point at. So the other documented trails in the forest management or in the land they're tripping over in the LMA are the Kirkland Lake ski trails, right? There's also a forested area around there. That whole area is off limits as well because they're documented trails. I understand, yes, you can see trails from Google and that, but if somebody goes out there now and breaks their neck, who are they going to talk to? That's one question that, from a very blunt perspective, I always ask. And, that's not a whole answer in and of itself, but it's one that I think you kind of want to look at. Do you put yourself in the same kind of setup as, say, the Huron Trail, where there's this organization and they're fundraising and they're doing all this stuff and they're taking a legal position on it? That's, I think, to me, what a documented, undocumented trail is. That does not rule out, like we said with Ms. Clarkson, well, yeah, they are definitely there. Why wouldn't we map them? And let's take a look at it. I just can't speak for council as to what decision you may want to make with that. Jeff, you want to?
Yeah, so the other sort of, I guess, legal approach to that is if they become held under a land use permit or some kind of instrument like that through the Ministry of Natural Resources, then they gain some.
Yeah, that like for us, we have that too. Like if you're doing something on municipal land, there's a indemnity form that we have filled out. It goes to council, is recognized as such. And I'll go out on a limb here. I think if trails like that would be a good idea if you actually made that approach to council and said, this is what we have, and cross your T's and dot your I's with something like that. People are always willing to listen, but something can go differently too.
Okay, well, there's a couple more hands raised, but I'll leave it up to you if you want to allow that or not.
Well, let's go for a couple more there before I fade out completely here.
Okay, so we'll go to, well, the name says, I think it's Chappie Fellow.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I've been making maps lately and I grew up in Swass. So I've heard twice in this discourse that there's no maps of the trails and documentation is a concept. I'm going to document the trails and make a map of the trails in Swastika and the adjacent proximity in the next maybe week or so, and I'll email it to the appropriate people. I've been making maps lately. That's my deal. So I would love to produce a map of the trails in Swastika for you.
Okay, there again, I would strongly suggest that there's a group that is, working with these trails, maintaining them, and that.
Oh no, that's not to interrupt. Sorry.
Yeah, but I get these. I bring them in. I include them with the record. But if you want to, I guess, formalize your situation with the trails, have that conversation with council.
Oh, it's an academic level map.
Yeah, no, I realize that you as a map maker, you're not the one, but this is just something that, when stuff occurs on another entity's land, it's just a good thing to do.
Most certainly.
Yeah.
It's just good to have a document. So I'll make one for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And what was the other one?
We have Alana with her hand up again. And that's her on mute.
Hi, sorry to drag this on a little longer than you had hoped. My question is, in regards to going to the town council meeting, the reality is, on my Facebook post that I've been sharing, Eugene Ivanov has gone ahead and shared a comment that was in agreement with the timber harvest of Swastika North. And he did not share any comments that were against it. And my concern is, if I go and do this, are we really going to have an impartial council? Or is it going to be a situation where somebody has already made up their mind and I'm just wasting my time?
No, I don't think you're wasting your time at all. First off, a counselor is only a counselor at a council meeting. Okay. And I appreciate, in real life, what does that mean? But it is important. Mr. Ivanov is responding really as an individual. When it comes to council, be it you, me, whatever else, he is one among 7. And the decision is made by the majority, and that's the one that applies. Because one person has an opinion that he's expressed as an individual, I've seen very often where they will, the decision that they back is not the opinion that they expressed as an individual. And many times that's because they understand or have come to understand what the impact or importance to the community is. It may not be something that they agree with, but they'll still back it. So I really strongly say that, no, you are not, walking into a stacked shop here. That's not the truth. That you really bring it forward.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Jeff, do you have any parting words of wisdom?
No, I don't. I appreciate everybody's time to take out of their schedule to do this. I think it's been helpful, and there's been good questions and discussions on this. I think we've been able to clear up a couple of questions and unknowns through the last hour. And I think, circling back to the beginning, the decision has not been made at this point, but we need to get the feedback before the process goes forward in some way, shape, or form. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of move towards shutting it down simply because I'm fading right now. You had some really good questions, and I'm sorry if consultation like this brings the hackles up and sets you on fire, but it's good too, because that's the kind of stuff that within a municipal government structure we do need on important issues like that. And I think, to go back to Mr. Coombs' point, that's why I get kind of emotional, or not emotional, but I don't know what, excited when you're talking about the LMA. I don't like documents a whole lot. I write for a living. I don't like documents a whole lot, but I do believe that there's an intrinsic value, and part of that intrinsic value to something like the LMA is that it is a code of conduct, but it's only valuable if issues are brought forward and discussed within that context to get public feedback to make it stronger. That's probably sounds way too philosophical. It's been a long day. But thank you very much, everybody. I am aiming for the April 6th meeting. I am getting some new assignments tomorrow, so I have to see how that'll fit. Certainly we'll, stay tuned. We'll let you know. Now, that problem with the email address, I'm going to try to correct that and have that posted. If you you have my email address, it's wilfred.huss, Hass, tkl.ca. If you have follow-up comments and all that, yeah, I'll take a look at them and see if I can include them. I'm just amazed at how much people, that participated in the online and here are of similar thought. So I think that we will do a good job of capturing that and bringing that to council. Yeah, that's all I got. I'm done. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Right, thank you, people.